Hello and welcome to the Go Ahead Dublin Championship Final podcast. It's Kilmacud Crokes versus Na Fianna, part 2. Crokes got the better of Na Fianna in the Senior 1 football final last weekend. Na Fianna will be looking for revenge, while Crokes will be looking to do the double again as the sides meet in the Go Ahead Dublin Senior 1 Hurling Final this Sunday afternoon at Parnell Park. Okay, I'm delighted to be joined by Joe Fortune. Joe, thanks a million for joining us. Look ahead to Sunday's game.
No hassle, Derek. No problem at all.
And now you've been on Dubs TV and RTE over the past few weeks, so seen plenty of the championship this year. It's obviously been year one of the new championship structure, the 10-team championship. How have you enjoyed the championship this year?
I think it's been a really good championship. I suppose, look, the first year was always going to have that kind of element of, was it going to work, or how teams were going to react to it, especially coming towards the end of, or the latter part of the league as well. Obviously, Lucan had a really good league campaign, beating Bowden in the final, and then those two teams would have progressed into the championship with aspirations of going on and driving on to a semi-final or final. But overall, the games I've been in at, at times there was really high quality, and at times as well, I suppose teams were kind of feeling each other out in regards to where they were going to go. And the big thing was getting out of your group into a quarter final. I suppose the same as everywhere else, Derek. People are talking then about whether it means more going straight to a semi-final or the fact that you have a quarter-final game to play. But I think overall, how the county board have dealt with it, how they've looked at the teams that are really at senior significance at that level, I think it just pertains to the fact that, look, these are the teams that are at that level, and now you've got obviously a couple of teams coming up, and unfortunately a couple of teams dropping down. But it gives the likes of Whitehall and Fogs real aspirations and hope for next year to be hurling at Senior 1 level.
Yeah, and I guess we'll go more in depth into both Kilmacud Crokes and Na Fianna a little bit later. But maybe a lot of people earlier in the year would have seen Na Fianna's form, and it had been patchy for large parts of the early part of the league and into the championship. And Kilmacud Crokes, as it's a much changed team from last year in a lot of ways, the team that won the county championship last year. But overall, do you feel that Crokes and Na Fianna are the best two teams in the championship heading into this final? Are they the two deserving teams in the final, I guess?
Yeah, I'm a massive believer in, if you're in a final, you deserve to get there. I think the work that's gone in, I think it's an intriguing final ahead, and the fact that you've got two teams who obviously were there last year, two teams who are in football final as well. It's testament to the work that's going on in these clubs. And I suppose I've said it a number of times over the last couple of weeks at different media outlets that people talk about super clubs, but there's incredible people involved in these clubs as well, Derek. To get to that level, both from a hurling and football perspective, is huge in Dublin GAA. But I think both teams, just to answer your question, I think both teams have been, have progressed like they probably needed to and wanted to from a management point of view. And I think both teams, to have to beat Bowden and Coola in a semi-final, I think you deserve to be there. And look, I'm looking forward to what to me is an intriguing final based on the fact that Na Fianna were 8-9 points up last year before Hazer came back and rescued it for Crokes at the end. So I think there's an awful lot at stake for both clubs at the weekend, from a youth perspective, but also from a hurling perspective too going forward. I'm sure there's a lot of people on the north side would love to see a county title coming back over this side of the river. But I still think, based on what both managements have done, you have to give its testament and credit to both clubs, both from an underage perspective, what Na Fianna have done at underage level, the amount of minor and under 21 titles that they've won in Dublin over the last number of years. Crokes have won 3 in a row, I think 18, 19, 20. Those young players that are coming through, it's testament to management as well that they really are back in the youth in the club. And really looking forward to what I think will be a massively interesting final on Sunday.
Yeah, and outside, not to put you on the spot, but outside of Na Fianna and Crokes, who has impressed you this year maybe as a team? A lot of people may have been pleasantly surprised by St. Vincent's, for example, for large parts of this championship and how they played. And maybe Lucan, they won the league this year and they maybe never really took off in the championship. Overall, who are you impressed by in the championship outside Na Fianna and Crokes, and maybe who will maybe feel more disappointed that they're not in the county final this year?
I think all teams, like all of those teams that are in, say, 8 of the top 10 there would have aspirations of getting to a quarter-final, semi-final. I'd say Bridges are disappointed with how their year went. You know, they've got some really good people involved there, and just were on the wrong side of a couple of really, really narrow defeats. I thought Lucan looked very, very impressive in the league. You know, I saw them in the league final against Bowden, and you know, I thought they could push on this year. But again, like between league and championship, as you know, Derek, there's a massive difference and a massive gulf. A lot of clubs had people away. I was impressed. I'm not going to lie. I was impressed with Bowden this year as well. I thought they were going really, really well. But like Crokes the last day, you know, really put them to the sword when they had to. You know, Cooler are always going to be thereabouts. I did question at times, I suppose, in the second half how they were allowing that puck out go so short to John, which kind of gave that platform going forward to them. But look, I think the teams that are there, I think Lucan are still probably maybe 1 or 2 away from getting back to the top. But you know, they really showed, I suppose, significant progress this year in the league. Just didn't really carry it into championship. But again, great people involved in that club, both on and off the pitch. And you'd have to give, like, look, it's the same teams that are coming up. Unfortunately, you know, you look at the teams that have gone down, and they're 2 very proud clubs of Dublin Hurling as well, and they'll fight their way back. And I'm sure the people that are involved in both those clubs will seriously put their shoulders to the wheel over the next while to get them back to Senior 1 again. But overall, it's been a very entertaining championship. But I'd agree that the best 2 teams for me so far in the last couple of games are in the final.
Okay, before we go any further, let's hear from both camps ahead of Sunday's game. We've been chatting to Kilmacud Crokes defender Brian Sheehy and, first of all, Na Fianna captain Donald Burke. Joined by Donald Burke, the Na Fianna captain here at Parnell Park, ahead of this weekend's go-ahead Dublin Senior 1 hurling final. It's Na Fianna versus Kilmacud Crokes, Sunday 2:30 here at Parnell Park. Donald, thanks a million for joining us. First of all, a couple of weeks ago we were here for the semi-final, Na Fianna versus Coola. There was a goal John O'Tracy scored into the goal right behind you here. Well, he says he scored it. I was talking to him afterwards. He claimed full responsibility. I was speaking to you afterwards. You claimed full responsibility for the goal as well. So put this to rest. Whose goal was it?
As long as the ball went in, that's the main thing. But I'm very sure I got a touch there.
So you're claiming it, are you?
I'm going to claim it, yeah, but we're
going to need to give John the right to reply to that after the final, maybe. In terms of that performance, first of all, the Coola game. Maybe this year, in terms, you've been kind of maybe struggling for form for a lot of this campaign due to injuries and whatnot. You've been able to get through the group stages, through the quarter-final into semi-final here, and had a really strong performance against Coola in the semi-final. Must give you plenty of confidence heading into the final.
Yeah, absolutely. We've kind of been taking it game by game, to be honest. So we kind of struggled in the league to gain a bit of momentum. So since then, we've kind of been playing must-win matches. So I think that's kind of coming to fruition now a bit. We've had tough matches for the last maybe 2 months or so. So we're just delighted to be back in this position. Yeah,
and I guess that's what it is in terms of. I won't say you're peaking at the right time, but you're certainly getting better as the season has gone on in terms of getting through the group stages. I think the most important thing was getting out of the group, which you managed to do, and you keep improving game on game, as you say.
Yeah, absolutely. We're just taking it game by game. We definitely went out to win those games in the group, and I think I felt we had a strong enough teams to win that games. But Coola and Bowden were well deserving of those victories. So it was all about just getting out of the group. We had a tough game against Plunkett's, got over the line, and then we had a tough game against Vincent's, got over the line. So they're just great games to have and come out on the other side of.
Yeah. From your point of view, from the Fianna point of view, you're a pretty young team, and over the last 3 years you reached the semi-final in 2020, the final last year, the final this year. You're probably the formed team over the past 3 seasons, deservedly into another county final as well. So you're going pretty well over the past 3 years, and I guess it bodes well for the future of Na Fianna hurling.
Yeah, absolutely. People still call us young, so I'll take that comment. We're kind of coming on, but yeah, we're just. I suppose we had a good few years underage, and that's kind of come to fruition now, and we had a good spell, and we're just hoping to keep it going. I suppose we don't really. I'd say a couple of years ago we would have been struggling against the older teams, and like the I wouldn't say the older teams, but like the stalwarts of the Bowdens, Coolas, and we're just delighted to be competing. That's what we try to do every year. So yeah, we're still here. We're happy.
What do you make of Kilmacud Crokes, and what sort of challenge can you expect from this weekend?
Yeah, it's going to be a big test, definitely. Sure, they're the champions, like so, and they're definitely, I would say, they're the informed team at the moment. They had an impressive win in the semi-final against Bowden, and look, it's a big test for us, but we're looking forward to it.
And finally, we're here in a very quiet Parnell Park this afternoon. We're hoping it'll be a little bit busier on Sunday afternoon. How important will it be to get a big Na Fianna support here on Sunday to help, hopefully, from your point of view, drive you over the line?
Yeah, it'd be massive, and no, I've no doubt that the spoils will come out, and the bunting has been up around all week, so I've no doubt they'll be out in force, and we're looking forward to hopefully be a nice, good atmosphere.
Okay, joined by Brian Sheehy, Kilmacud Crokes defender here at Parnell Park ahead of this weekend's go-ahead Dublin Senior 1 Hurling Final. Kilmacud Crokes versus Na Fianna Sunday afternoon at 2:30 in the Senior 1 Final. Brian, first of all, looking back at the semi-final win over Ballybowden St Enda's a couple of weeks back, a good win for yourselves against a very strong Ballybowden St Enda's team, I guess sets you up nicely for the final to come this weekend.
Absolutely, yeah, we knew Bowden were always going to bring a massive physical battle, and they have so much experience there. I think we matched them well, and it was a great win in the end, so we're really looking forward to the final now.
Yeah, this season has gone pretty well for yourselves so far. You're unbeaten in the competition, the only team obviously still left unbeaten in the championship this year. You've been playing pretty well throughout this championship campaign.
Yeah, we're happy enough with how it's kind of coming up now. We didn't start well. We had a couple of scraped by Luke and scraped by Bridget's. I think the last couple of weeks we've kind of got our momentum going again, and we haven't lost in Dublin Championship since 2020, so it's definitely take confidence from that going into next Sunday.
Yeah, and obviously you're going for 2 in a row this year, but I guess this year in a lot of ways you're going for back-to-back titles, but it's a very different team this year compared to last year. Well, very different maybe over saying that, but in terms of you've got a lot of new players, younger players in the panel this year compared to last year, so it is kind of a different team compared to last year. It's the same club, but obviously not maybe the same team going back-to-back.
Yeah, I saw some mad stat there that 7 of our starting finalists last year are gone now. We lost a couple of lads, emigration, a few retirements. So it's really good to get the new blood in this year. Like, great to see some lads from the second team like Cian Ryan and Michael Roach coming up, really stepping up and like clearly starting now. First name the T-sheets, those lads these days. And then we've a couple of minor lads coming through, young Brian Hayes, other lads. So the young blood that keeps coming through, and it's credit to the management being able to integrate all of them and keep us going this year.
Yeah, and I guess going for back-to-back titles can be difficult at times, but that fresh blood I'm sure helps in terms of pushing everybody on the team to keep going and to keep pushing on to try and win games.
Absolutely, like you don't want the thing to become stale at any stage. It's this new blood, get new personalities, new faces into the team, keeps everyone going, keeps a bit of freshness in the team, and just really looking forward to next weekend now.
Yeah, and in on that as well, it is a pretty young team as well, so this is a team. Obviously, your full focus is on Na Fianna this weekend, but this is a team that could be around for a few years to come as well.
Yeah, and it's a credit to the management. They've trusted the youth. As other clubs might stick with their experienced older guard, but to be fair to Dinny and Teddy, they've entrusted in the lads who played, underage at Dublin, and I think that's really come to fruition now. And I think Na Fianna are the same. They've a very young team as well, so sets up for an epic battle, I'm sure. Yeah,
and finally that Na Fianna game it's this weekend. It's Na Fianna versus Kilmacud Crokes, two teams who know each other very, very well. Last year's final, and we've played each other so many times over the past few years as well in Championship and in League. What can you expect from Na Fianna this weekend?
I expect a huge game. Like they'll be gunning for us after what happened last year. We'll be trying to show that it wasn't a fluke last year, that we did deserve it, and we'll be going to try and win it again this year. Very tactical battle, I'm sure, with both management team very capable tactically, so it'll be interesting to see how it plays out now. Yeah, really looking forward to it.
Yeah, and finally just a word on support as well. Parnell Park is empty at the moment, but we're all hoping for a full Parnell Park this weekend for the game. How big a support and how big will that help you if you have a big Kilmacud Crokes support here on Sunday?
Massive, especially like the last 10 minutes last year coming down the home stretch to make that comeback. We wouldn't have done it without the fans in the stand. I think the last couple of years the club has put a big emphasis on integrating the younger members with the adult teams, and it's showing now with the support we're getting. It's just fantastic.
Okay, Donald Burke and Brian Sheehy chatting to me ahead of Sunday's game. Crokes, Joe, I guess almost a new team, as Brian mentioned there. 7 of the team that played in last year's final weren't involved in the semi-final and haven't been involved this year. A big turnover of players, I guess, but they seem to have done that seamlessly, that turnover of players pretty seamlessly this year?
I think the key word there is seamless. I think a lot of it comes down as well to effective and good management as well, Derek. Like, we played Crokes in 18 in a drawn county final, and the turnover from then, I think there was only 2 players 2 weeks ago who didn't play the semi-final for Bowden. But turnover for Kilmacud has been astronomical, and testament to the work that's been done there at schools level with Closhane, and to people like what I loved the last day, I actually met on the way out. I met Kieran and Donald McGovern on the way out, and the humility and humbleness of both of them, as in they put it down to the work that's done at underage level in the club, put it down to the work that's been done by Donald and that in the schools and stuff. But you look at some of these players that they have coming through now, and I suppose they're used to winning at underage level, and they have that kind of swagger about them. I've been lucky enough to have, I suppose, players from both camps in a Dublin capacity over the years, and the likes of Quailon and Oisin, Keane McGowan are really driving on these young lads that are coming through. And I've mentioned a couple of times the likes of Davy Crowe, Dara Purcell, young Mark Rogan. I thought was exemplary the last day at 6 in that area, kind of covered in for that for losing out on young Murphy from Cork. But I just think overall it's testament, I suppose, to both clubs. But from a Croke perspective, you have to look at the fact that these young lads coming through now have that real bite in them. There were questions you mentioned about Vincent's having a good campaign in the championship, and they did, and they put Hedgew in at 14, where I think he's best, and he caused massive problems for that Crokes full back line in the quarter final. But geez, they answered questions in the semi final again. Young Butler that's in full back, and he's probably a mainstay. He was there in 18 when I came up against him in the county final, but the 2 young lads in around him have just been exemplary over the last while. And I think when you look at, I suppose, the development of a club, and I listened to Niall Corcoran last week when you had him on in regards to the football side of things, and I suppose there's a lot of talk about what has to happen and needs to happen at club level. But I think both the teams that are in the final at the moment have put massive structures in place to allow young players come through, not only for their clubs, but I suppose going forward for Dublin as well. And look, what a platform on Sunday national television for, if you think that, you think of the likes of the Currys, young Murphy for Na Fianna, Mark Rogan, Purcell, young Crow, young O'Cosig, all these young guys that now are that are on a platform on Sunday to allow themselves not only win significant silverware for their clubs, but also put their names forward for new management in charge of the Dublin senior hurling team as well.
From a Na Fianna point of view, they struggled for large parts of the year. I think 3 wins in the league this year, into the group stages. In the last group game, they beat Plunkett's by 2 points. If they lost that game, they would have been into a relegation playoff. They beat Plunkett's by 2 points out in O'Toole Park to get out of the group. Then seemed to turn on the tap, turn on the form that they have shown over the past few weeks, beating an in-form St. Vincent's team in the quarter-final and an in-form Coola team in the semi-final. Both teams who had been playing very well in the championship this year. You don't want to say it, but are they really peaking at the right time, peaking in the knockout stages, hoping that they would get there, and then peaking for the latter stages of the championship?
Yeah, I'd say, look, I'd imagine what people forget as well is that Na Fianna have had a horrible year injury-wise. They've lost some significant players through injury. Over the last number of weeks, they had players travelling, and I suppose Crokes had as well. Crokes at Young Grogan was away for a while too, and only came back into it the last day. But from a Na Fianna perspective, like, they lost Paul O'Dea, who's probably iconic to that half-back line. Shane Barrett, I had him as captain in 16 to win a Leinster title, and Shane is a huge part of that Na Fianna team, and went off and has had a significant knee injury, I think, at the time. But they've lost, like, the young Currys weren't around. I'd say there was a time of the year as well where the likes of Niall and Birchie and Owen Roach and that, like, they really had to look deep inside themselves as management and as a panel as well to try and get themselves. Like, Plunkett's had a good year this year, obviously maintained their senior status, and Na Fianna were pushed to the pin of their collar, I suppose, out in O'Toole Park, and to get out by 2 or 3 points. But look, it's all about progression, and it's all about making sure that you win those games of significance. And all Na Fianna had to do was get out of their group and get to knockout stages. And I listened to Donald, I think, over the last couple of days, and he was chatting about how it's about when you get to that knockout stage, the games that you have to win, that Na Fianna have done it. And it's testament to the players they have. Even when something's going wrong on a pitch, like Berkey missed a couple of frees the last day, and Curry stepped up. So, like, they're well used to backing each other up. I think they're a very close group as well, from what you'd see. I think both teams, and I think you have to have that to get to that next level. There has to be massive trust and that level of, I suppose, commitment in among the group itself, and I think both teams have that. I think the Na Fianna and Crokes guys seem to really, there seems to be a really close bond there between both groups, which I think is massively significant for both teams to be in a final.
Yeah, and from a Na Fianna point of view, Joe, was it a matter of just getting the lads back? I mean, was it literally just the fact that they had the injuries and the lads were out travelling? And is that, obviously the lads have come back travelling after the summer and they're getting some of their injuries back as well. Was it just a matter of trying to get a settled team, settled 15 out there, getting the best players back, and then go and see what we can do as soon as we get out of the group, go see what we can do in the knockout stages?
Yeah, like you have to remember, we spoke earlier on about the whole format changing, Derek, and like teams were used to playing maybe 2 matches in March, or maybe a match or 2 in March, and then the big long break before you went back out again in September. And I suppose this year has been different, where you had those games in a very tight, they were so close together, and you had tough games. There was no easy game really in any of the groups. Like you saw what some people would perceive to be the lesser teams really putting it up to some of the big teams as well. I think from the Fianna's perspective, like when you have players like Shane Barrett, Paul O'Dea, young Burke was carrying an injury. The 2 Currys were away at one stage as well. Donald Burke came back. I said it on one of the live transmissions as well, that like he came straight out of a really busy intercounty career or intercounty year and went all of a sudden then straight into, and it's a lot to ask these young players as well. And I know he was carrying a small bit of a niggle into the club campaign as well. So I think for the likes of for Bertie and for Niall and those lads involved with Na Fianna, it was about making sure as soon as possible they got their best 15 on the field. But I think what's key to Sunday as well is the fact that both teams, Derek, have good benches. What's in reserve, I think, is quality from both, like really good underage players. From a Crokes perspective, like they've young Brian Hayes, Fiona Callig, young Stakelin. Like there's loads of players there in reserve for Crokes. And again, when you talk to Na Fianna, like you see what Sean Ryan has done when he's come in the last couple of games as well. Will Niall Murphy start again? I'd imagine he will. He's a fine player. And then you have, we haven't mentioned an awful lot of players even that are available to both teams. So I think for both managements, just to answer the question, I think it was about getting the team fit on the field for the knockout stage, which was the quarter-final or semi-final.
And again, we mentioned already, Joe, for both teams, in terms of the younger players come through, especially for Kilmacud Crokes, 7 players who were involved last year aren't involved this year. They brought through a lot of their minors. Obviously, Na Fianna had that minor success a few years ago as well. 2 very young teams, really, in the grand scheme of things. A lot of experience in there as well. Guys have been playing for the last few years. Donald was a young man, but he's obviously got plenty of experience at inter-county level as well. A lot of experience in both teams, but still quite a young, 2 quite young panels that they could be around. Certainly that 15 or certainly 18, 19, 20 of those players could be around for the next 4 or 5 years if they wanted to be.
Yeah,
like panels really.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think the big thing as well is that I even saw in 18 you get to county final or a Leinster title, and you think like there's a long journey back, Derek, to the county final the following year, and I think credit to both teams here, where I suppose at some stage people will say Na Fianna have to win one based on their underage success, but there's no county title handed out based on underage success, and I think from Na Fianna's perspective, to get back there again is deserves its huge accolades to people involved, because it's a long way from a county final, especially after the disappointment of last year. I think what's key in both camps is very true to what you said. I think the experience that's there, I think from a Na Fianna perspective, look, I had him involved as a minor in 07, and again, I suppose at colleges level as well. Like Liam Rush has been a massive addition to the Na Fianna team. I think when it came down to the really tough, really going to war the last day, when there was a couple of dirty balls that needed to be won, Rushy came out with 3 or 4 balls that are really pivotal. It was called for steps, I think, for one of them, but was really, really, really significant when he needed to be. Like he really stood up as a man, and I suppose when he had young Burke and young Clerkin beside him as well, like he's driving those young lads on, and I think the experience that's there. AJ's been around a few years now. Again, was with us in 18 as well, or in 16. So he's been around, but again, can light up Parnell Park on a good sod as well. Can really go to town if he needs to. So those lads are, John O'Tracy in goal, who claimed that infamous goal, I suppose, last day. They're guys that are around, I suppose, that played Dublin under 21 in 16, 15 and 16. So they're coming to an age now where they have to be leaders. But I think none bigger than what Rushy has done for Na Fianna in the last couple of years. And look, there's a lot of Dublin people, I suppose. of the Dublin hurling people as well would love to see, I suppose, similar to the likes of, I suppose, Keeney and McCaffrey and PK and fellas like that, McCrabb, who've been iconic for Dublin over the last maybe 10 years. You'd love to see Liam Rush with a county medal in his pocket, but not if you're from Crokes. And from Crokes' perspective as well, again, going back to Oisín at 11 this year has been outstanding. I think Quillan Conway has really stepped up as a captain. Keane McGowan, I think, had a bit between his teeth that he wasn't starting maybe in the quarter-final or in a couple of the group games, and came back in. I thought he was excellent the last day for Crokes. And again, like you look at the turnover of real leaders from that Crokes team, which has allowed the likes of Hazer and Oisín and those lads to become leaders on their own team, because they've lost significant players over the last number of years, from goalie all the way up to like really, really high profile players that would have played at a significant level with Dublin as well.
Both, as you'd expect at the county final, both teams have some injury concerns. Alex Considine for Kilmacud Crokes went off the last day against Ballybowden St. Enda's, and Shane Barrett for the Fianna as well, who got injured in the quarter final win over St. Vincent's. How important would both players be if they were available this weekend? How important are both players to both teams?
I'd say my first point being, like, if you can tie yourself together in any capacity at all for the weekend, you'll do it, Derek. I think Shane Barrett, again, captained that Dublin team in 16. If Shane Barrett can do anything to get on that field on Sunday, he will. And I've no doubt they'll do something to get him, to make him look. If it's a significant knee injury that he's going to need surgery for anyway, I'd have no doubt that they'll try and get something out of him if they can. Considine has been a revelation in ways over the last couple of years. He's the forward, I suppose, that you could possibly argue Dublin have been missing for a long time. He's real direct. He has that head down capacity of really driving a goal. He's been exciting. He's strong. He's big. Been unfortunate last year too. I know he was in the Dublin panel, and when training seemed to be kind of stepped up, and when it went to the next level to go to championship wise, he got unfortunate with injuries. But he's exciting. You just hope that the 3 or 4 years that he's had out of that intercounty level won't go against him. But from a club perspective, look, the two lads are huge, and I think Paul O'D is massive as well. I'm not going to Paul O'D has been outstanding for Na Fianna for the last couple of years. If they could tie him back together for the weekend, it'd be huge, even if it's only for a nominal certain number of minutes that you need a couple of people to come in. It's not in any disregard to people who are playing that are fully fit, but those lads like Considine and Barrett are massive to Na Fianna and Crokes. So look, you'd hope I suppose from a player perspective too, I'd be very fond of Shane Barrett, Paul O'D as well. Didn't get a chance to work with Alex, but you'd love that they would get an opportunity to put their foot on the grass of Parnell Park on Sunday for county final too.
And outside of those players, what are the key matchups for this weekend's game? Where do you see the game being won and lost this weekend?
I think what's key to me is what Na Fianna do with Oisín O'Rourke. I think Oisín O'Rourke is key to that half forward line for Crokes. I think the fact that he's not your typical 11, he moves off the 11 into that midfield zone, and himself and young Purcell have been outstanding, I think, over the course of the games that I've seen. I think Na Fianna are going to have to tie Purcell up. Like I watched him the last day, I think I commented, he just glides over the top of the ground, Derek. He's a really exciting young player, very athletic, very clued in. I would imagine the Crokes management are just they have a Rolls Royce of a player in him. I think he's really, really exceptional, with potential to get better for the future as well and stronger and so on. So I think the midfield, kind of that half forward zone for Crokes is crucial. Quillan Conway will win ball. Gibbons has been a fine keeper as well, and I think himself and Jono are probably potentially, I suppose, looking at getting into that hot seat for Dublin too. If it's ever vacated by Nolan or Sean Brennan. So, the two very exciting keepers, very, very good on puckouts. They're not they're very direct, they form a very good pattern play as well from their puckouts, both teams. I think for me, what stood out from the games I've seen of Crokes is that not only is that half back line and midfield good defensively, but they're providing that platform for the two boys inside. And if ball goes into Hayes and Considine, two really exciting young forwards, if the ball goes in at that kind of angle, it's very hard to defend against. So I think for me, if I'm coming up against Crokes at the weekend, I want to shut down that ball that's coming from the half back line and midfield. I thought at times during the Vincent's game that some of the younger lads were under pressure. Young Sheehy came into his own then the last day in the semi-final. Butler as well was strong. Young Ryan as well. So I think they've answered that question from a management perspective. I suppose from the Fianna's point of view, look, I suppose Berkey and the two Currys are key to what young, like Murphy is a fine young player as well, Derek. So like I think if I'm in the Kilmacud dressing room, I want to shut down. You obviously want to shut down Donald Burke and the influence they can have on a game, but I have seen over the last couple of years as well when Berkey is shut down, like Colin and Sean do step up as well for Na Fianna. So it's a really intriguing battle ahead, and I'm actually happy that you'd be kind of standing on the sideline and watching this weekend, because I think for both managements, I think the perspective, the prize is huge. Crokes, I think, won't be happy. They won a county final last year. They beat the Westmeath champions Raharney, and they went on then and were disappointing against Clough-Ballacalla from Laois. And I suppose maybe they have that bit between their teeth that they could drive on and possibly put a Dublin club into a Leinster final this year. Na Fianna, look, they had it won last year. They were 7, 8, 9 points up at one stage, and that last couple of decisions, I think if a stronger player had been in positions at time, I think it just looked to me that there was a small bit of, it was their first county final, a little bit of naivety towards the end, and they just, I'd say it hurt what happened last year for them. So I'd say that bit between their teeth is there as well for Na Fianna to try and drive on and actually bring that county final back to Moby Road as well.
Yeah, and again, you were there last year, Joe. How much does what happened last year play a part this year, mentally, even? Do Na Fianna, obviously, it's part of their motivation for this year. If you need any more motivation going into a county final, that's certainly it. But do you talk too much about it? Do you try and nearly mention it but put it to one side? And from a Crokes point of view, if they're, do they bring it up at all, either in terms of mentioning it? The game was pretty much lost for them at one point last year with 7 or 8 minutes to go, and obviously they came back to win it. So do either team bring it up as much this week heading into county final, or is it something that's kind of in the background and you try and maybe ignore it for the most part?
Yeah, look, I'd say subconsciously it's going to be there. I suppose I had that question in my head when I watched them the last day against when I watched Na Fianna the last day against Coola, and I wondered, like, they went so far ahead, and all of a sudden that proud club that are Coola and what they've done for Dublin hurling over the last number of years came back at them. And I did wonder, was this kind of going to be sitting in the back of their mind? Could we actually drive on? But they did. And look, I was lucky enough this year with Westmeath to work with a guy called Shane O'Sullivan from Ballygunner, really top class, high performance coach. And he would always talk about, Derek, about staying in the moment, about working in that moment. And I think the players that are there for both Na Fianna and Crokes now, like last year is done. The celebrations were done. The disappointment of the Leinster campaign was done. I think it's a new year, and I think for both clubs, like, could you subconsciously be thinking about it coming into the last few minutes? Look, it's only natural as humans that you would, but I'm sure that the likes of Niall and that have done a lot of work with Na Fianna in the background as well to Park last year, because remember before then they hadn't been in a county final before, and that old saying of you have to be in one or you have to lose one to win one, is that true? It's a good one. I'd say it'll probably apply. I don't think you've time. I think that the speed of some of the games over the last while, I don't know if they're going to have time to think like that. I'd say management might. I'd say if Na Fianna are 4 or 5 points up with a couple of minutes to go, I'd say the likes of Birchie and Niall and Roche, you've done great work with Na Fianna. I'd say they'll age a couple of years until the final whistle is blown. And again, just even on the whistle thing, I think it's important to acknowledge too that like the referees' performances over the last, I know there's been a lot of talk in media about our application of, I suppose, respect to referees, but in the games that I've been in, they've been so well refed over the last couple of games, and Tom Gleeson's in charge on. I know he'd won at the semi-finals on as well in Dublin, but like he's in charge on Sunday. Big day for him too. I think it's his second county final, but like the standard of refereeing, I think it has dramatically improved in Dublin over the last couple of years, and big day for him as well, and for Paul Fogland doing the Senior 2 final too. So. It all comes down, like for me, Derek, when you get to a final, doesn't have to be the prettiest affair in the world. It all comes down to that real want to go to that dark place to really, really want to win it. And Crokes did that last year when everything was against him. I remember RTE at the time were pushing me to call man of the match, and I just had this feeling in my head that Hayes could do something special, and he did. At right in the last kind of 30 seconds, which probably made me look like a bit of a gobshite for calling man of the match. Anyway.
Absolutely. And yeah, best of luck to Thomas Gleeson this weekend. Obviously, he is the referee for the Senior 1 final from Nafion Barra and GPO as well for Scully Cunnell. So best of luck to him this weekend and his team. Now, last week we caught up with Kilmacud Crokes GPO Niall Corcoran. This week it's the focus is on Na Fianna as we chatted to their Director of Coaching and Player Development, Niall Cooper. Okay, Niall Cooper, thanks a million for joining us.
You're welcome. How's it going, Derek?
Not too bad at all, thanks. And I know it's a busy time for the club, obviously, at the moment, county finals. First of all, hard luck at the weekend. You're obviously involved with the senior footballers at the weekend in their game against Kilmacud Crokes, so hard luck with that. But I know it's a lot of good buzz around the club, a lot of excitement around the club over the past few weeks. Senior won Camogie final a few weeks back. Obviously, the footballers last weekend and the hurlers this weekend. So I'm sure there's a good buzz around the club at the moment and plenty of excitement.
Massive. This time of year, I suppose, is always brilliant as all the competitions are sort of coming to the business end, and depending on the year, I suppose we're sort of, we can be lucky and unlucky with how many teams are still involved. So this year we've been in a couple of the finals now. The ladies footballers got to the semi-final too. So it's been a good year in terms of reaching the latter stages. We just need to try and win one or two now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Niall, you're the Director of Coaching and Player Development at Na Fianna. Tell us about your role at the club, and also obviously Donal Ryan is the GPO at the club as well. So tell us how you work with Donal, I guess, for the betterment of Na Fianna and coaching at the club.
Sure. Okay. Well, this year in April, I think it was, the club made a call to add a second coaching person to the club sort of staff. So that's me. I was very lucky to get the position. And so now there's two of us, myself and the GPO. We try and work to, Donal is more predominantly with the primary school age children. So he's in the schools, he does the nursery, he does the camps, and a lot of the juvenile teams that are sort of under 12. And my focus would be maybe on some of the teams that are above that, and then we sort of crisscross as needed, depending on what's happening at any particular time. So I guess one of the real objectives of my role is to make sure that the pathway for the kids is as strong and supportive as it possibly can be, all the way through to minor and into adulthood, as opposed to maybe in the past where we've directed a lot of our resources and time into the kids at primary school level predominantly.
Yeah, and I guess you're in a pretty good position in that regard, because I mean, I know you've worked with the nurseries over the last number of years anyway, and you will obviously know what's involved, I guess, in terms of nurseries and juvenile and minor. You've played it yourself at the club. You're also obviously involved with the seniors for the last number of years as well. So you know what it takes, I guess, to get from juvenile and underage level through to senior level, and you have that kind of insight, I guess, that'll help, I guess, Na Fianna and the younger kids and the juveniles in the club eventually get to a senior or position later on in adult games where I guess you're competing regularly for honours, be that senior one or be that junior or be that whatever it might be. You know what it takes, I guess, to get to that level.
Yeah, well, I guess one of the really key things that we're trying to focus on at the moment, that have been for a couple of months now, a couple of years, but really trying to put a strong focus on it, is to try and really build that link between the adult section of the club and the juvenile section. And because, like most GA clubs, I suppose there's a brilliant sense of sort of family and community and all in together type thing. But there can be times when it's actually quite insular in terms of people. They come down twice a week or 3 times a week. They might train with their own team and mightn't have a decent sense about what's happening outside of that for a lot of the players. So what we really want to try and do is to give the adults in the club a much stronger flavour about what's happening across the board at juvenile level, and then similar enough give the kids much more of a connection with the adults, and partly to try and give them something to aspire towards and something to want to build towards in their own sort of playing life, but also to just become a bit more ingrained in the fabric of the club outside of just playing camogie or hurling or football on a Tuesday and a Thursday.
Yeah, what's needed, I guess, at the club? What are the important ingredients, I guess, at the club to I don't want to kind of focus all the attention on your senior teams, but obviously if you're successful at senior level, it shows that you're doing something right at the club. So and at an adult level in general, which you have been over the past number of years. So I guess what's needed from a juvenile level to have the success, and I'm talking about at the playing numbers and the success that you've had at adult level over the last number of years. What's needed all along the way in the club, and what are the important ingredients, I guess, in that regard?
I was actually going to ask you the same question there. See if you could give tips. I think for me anyway, in my own personal opinion, will be is that I think we like to think we do a lot right. You know, we try and do things as best we can and make mistakes along the way, obviously. But in general, I think there's a really great crew of people down there that are really trying to do what's best for the kids and try and put them in a position to succeed. And one of our things is that we want to define what success looks like. So, you know, sometimes that's winning the senior championship. Sometimes that's maintaining a team all the way to minor. In terms of what's the missing ingredient, I think for Na Fianna, it's been a long time since at adult men's level we've been successful in at the senior ranks. So I think 2001 was the last time the lads won a senior football championship, and the hurlers are yet to win one as well. So from the ladies, I think they've been a lot more successful. You know, they've been quite strong on the football side of it in recent years and have won championships in the last decade or so. But there probably is a sense that we need to win one, you know, in any of the codes to try and almost get that first domino falling and create a sense of belief that it's possible. So maybe I think that intangible thing is what we're missing at the moment to try and get over the line.
You've been involved with the club now for all your life, I presume. I guess you've seen the club over the past maybe 20 years or so. How has the club grown over the last 20 years, and how has the club maybe improved over the last 20 years to help underage and help juveniles, which maybe wasn't there, or maybe it certainly wasn't as strong when you were growing up at the club?
Well, probably, even though I'm probably not as young as I like to think I am, when I grew up in the club, it was something very different to what it is today in terms of scale. So when I grew up, we would have had one team at every age, and sometimes none at all. I remember the year ahead of me, we joined up with Satanda to make sure that we had a hurling team as well. So times have really moved on. The nursery, as we call it, the Saturday morning sessions for the kids, that's something that's a real sort of cornerstone of the club, as it is, I'm sure, in most GAA clubs or in every GAA club. And going back to, say, the 90s when that started, which is a long time ago now, I suppose, the nursery wouldn't have existed, you know, up until maybe 93, 94, 95. And funny enough, we were only doing an exercise recently where I was looking back and talking to the people that were initially involved, and our first nursery had 5 kids in it. So it was just a couple of volunteers and 5 kids of various ages, boys and girls. So we're probably a long way. We've come a long way since then. At the moment, I think would there be maybe 500 or 600 kids in the nursery across the 3 ages for boys and girls. So it's grown hugely. But I guess with that growth comes challenges in terms of capacity and trying to get enough people and volunteers to try and make sure that all of those kids are supported and coached to the highest standard that we possibly can.
Be interesting to see where those 5 kids are now. Have they grown up to be Donald Burke and all these players? That'll be a project maybe for the future to see where they've gotten to. We mentioned already the ladies footballers got to the Senior 1 final last year. Camogie obviously this year. The hurlers have been in the Senior 1 final obviously last year and this year again. Footballers this year. So that shows what you're doing at senior level or at the club is working at senior level. You're getting to county finals. But I guess senior success isn't the be all and end all. It's not the most important thing. There's a lot more to the club than just that. But I guess it does inspire the younger generations. And I was here at the weekend after the county final. And obviously, we lost the county final, but there was players out here for a good half an hour after the game signing autographs and taking pictures with Na Fianna supporters. So I guess being in the county final and being successful at county final level and getting to county finals and getting to the last stage of the championships is important in terms of inspiring young kids to try and be like you and to try and be like the Donald Burkes and the girls in the Camogie and the ladies football as well, to try and be like them, I guess. And that's what the last few years have shown for Na Fianna, that you're getting to those levels and trying to inspire those kids.
Yeah, and I suppose that's a really nice way of putting it, and it goes back to that sort of building the connections between the adult and the juvenile sections in the club. In that sort of that roadmap for the kids is so important that they see and aspire to want to sort of to go along that sort of journey themselves. And I think it's it was a huge disappointment for the club on Saturday or on Sunday after the football, as it was for the girls a couple of weeks ago, as it was for previous losses, and that sense of like my own kids ran onto the pitch after the match, and I was obviously bitterly disappointed, but that they quickly sort of threw a little smile onto my face, and for even a few minutes there, and a lot of the kids that were coming on as well to the lads were sort of having the same effect too. So look, it would be silly to say that at adult level that we're not aspiring to win the big prizes, and we definitely are. I think the last time the club won the senior football championship in 2001 was the last one, and they won 3 in a row, 99, 2000, 2001. And that sort of time period really coincided with a big bump in the nursery numbers as well. So that shop window, or that sense of success and achievement, really helped to galvanize the whole club and create a little bit of momentum as well. So it's something that we're constantly trying to generate as well. And look, maybe one of these days we'll win, and from our point of view, we're really hoping that Sunday in the senior hurling final.
Absolutely. You've already mentioned the ladies football and the camogie. Tell us about the work that's gone in across the 4 codes, across hurling, football, but ladies football and camogie in particular, in terms of improving those over the past few years as well.
Well, I think if you go back to the nursery again, so the split in terms of boys and girls in our own nursery is slightly more towards the girls. So there's slightly more than 50% of the kids currently playing juvenile nursery games in the club are actually girls, which is absolutely fantastic. And there's almost parity now all the way up to the juvenile section in terms of numbers of teams for the boys and the girls. And even talking to our adult games chair earlier today, he was telling me that we're likely to have 4 minor ladies football teams next year, which will be a first, I think, for the club. So we're really, we don't really see it as investing extra time into the girls. I think it's just the fact that we try and create the same environment for both the boys and the girls, and there's no preferential treatment given to either one. So that has been a huge, I suppose, fill up for the girls sections, both sections, and we're seeing the benefits of that now in terms of the senior championships. But a different way of gauging that success, I suppose, especially as in the kids section, is how many kids do we have participating, how many kids do we have staying in the club, how well do we retain the kids up to adult level and beyond. That is sort of a key measure of success for us, and it's something that we would hope that we're doing quite well, and something that we'll look to continue.
I drove past Na Fianna the other day, Niall, and it was buzzing outside the gate at people. Throngs of people at Bua, the coffee shop, which is just at the entrance to Na Fianna on Moby Road. It seems to be a kind of a hub of a focus of attention around the community there. Tell us about the kind of the stuff that happens outside of what we see on the pitch. We see the Senior 1 teams playing in Parnell Park on Dubs TV or on TG Car, and everybody knows about those teams and the teams that have qualified for county finals and semi-finals and that kind of thing. But there's a lot. It seems to be a lot more going on at the club outside of that. So if you want to talk to us about that, and the kind of work going on for the club to be the kind of focus of attention of the community.
Yeah, sure. So I guess at the moment I'm obviously working for Na Fianna, but previous to that I worked for a Dublin GA for 14 or 15 years. And I guess one of the things I was lucky enough to be able to experience there was get a sense of what was happening across multiple clubs, particularly around West Dublin. And I think it's probably fair to say that pretty much every club aspires to obviously do well on the playing pitches, but to build that sort of sense of place, sense of family or whatever. So it's certainly not something that's unique to Na Fianna. And from our point of view, I guess the fact that the senior teams are doing quite well at the moment, and there's other teams that are in championship finals. I know that the junior football has only won their final on Sunday there, which is absolutely brilliant. But the other things that sort of go into making the club what it is, I guess, are absolutely monumentally important as well. So, even from a playing point of view, that there's teams for hopefully people at whatever level they want to participate at and a commitment they want to give. And we would have good representation across the ladies football, hurling and camogie. And then we also have a really strong handball and rounder section in the club. So, there's outlets there for anybody that's sort of that might be looking to play something, but not necessarily want to pick up a hurler or kick a football. In terms of Bua, I guess we'd be lost without Bua now. It's been there for a couple of years, and it's been an unbelievable unbelievable focal point for people to sort of just go and crisscross with people from different sections of the club and people that obviously aren't in the club as well, to just, go down, have a chat, and spend a bit of time in other people's company, and get to sort of maybe organically learn a little bit more about what's going on outside of your own little group in the club. So there's literally, you go in there on a Saturday morning, you've got all the nursery kids looking for their post-nursery hot chocolate and gingerbread man. You've got the moms and dads trying to juggle them, and then maybe the grandparents and beyond there as well. So there really is a great melting pot of people there, all the time, and particularly on those GA days, and the Saturday mornings and Saturday early afternoons are brilliant. And then in the evening times in the clubs, there's obviously training going on the whole time, but then there's other things going on that are sort of more in the social space or the cultural space, like there's Irish language classes for people of different levels. There's a Thursday evening music group that play down there, and lots of other things like that don't necessarily have anything to do with kicking a football, or swinging a hurl.
Good stuff. And if anybody wants to get involved with the club, if you want to get involved in the music night or the Irish language courses or rounders or handball or whatever it might be, how do you go about doing that? If you're a player, or if you're a parent who wants to get their child involved, or like I say, if you want to get involved in other activities at the club as well, how do they go about doing that?
Sure. Well, hopefully people shouldn't have to look too far for information. We have a very active social media section that the website's always updated. And I guess, there's so much activity around the club. We're constantly looking for volunteers. So people certainly shouldn't have to look too hard if they're looking to get involved. It's hard to direct people to one centre point. But again, if you've got kids of nursery age, then the Saturday morning is the place to go. If you're looking to get involved in something sort of outside of the playing of the games, the club facilities and the club bar are open pretty much most nights of the week as well. So it's a case of really just having to maybe drop down or check out one of the social media spaces to try and get that bit more information. But if we're doing our job well, you shouldn't have to look too hard.
Good stuff. So clgnafina.com is the website, and of course check out the Nafina social media channels for updates as well. No, thank you very much.
I think Annette would want me to say clgnafina.ie.
.ie. Good stuff. Okay. Thanks for that, Niall, and thank you very much for joining us today, and the very best of luck, obviously, going forward with the club and promoting the club in the area, and it being the centre of a community as well, but also best of luck this weekend as well in the hurling final.
Brilliant. Thanks a million, Derek.
Okay, Niall Cooper there, the Nafina Director of Coaching and Player Development, chatting about the great work going on at Nafina over the last number of years to get to a point where they're challenging for Senior 1 titles, as they are this weekend in the Senior 1 hurling final, and Nafina versus Kilmacud Crokes in the final on Sunday afternoon, 2:30 at Parnell Park. Joe, call it. Prediction time now. Who's going to win on Sunday?
I don't know, Derek. To be honest with you, I don't know. And that's not me sitting on the fence. And I'll give you I'll give you my tuppence worth for the €10 bet that we probably have. But I just think if I was part of either of these two clubs, and look, there are such proud clubs, hurling clubs and football clubs in Dublin, I'd be so proud of the two groups of players having gotten where they came from last year, back to a county final again. The work that's been done at football and hurling level in both clubs is testament to the people that are involved in the clubs. Look, I suppose I'd love to see Nafina win a county final, because I think for the players that I've been involved with over the number of years from a Dublin capacity, I'd love to see them have a county medal. I'd love to see Rushman in a county medal, but I just think Crokes, for me, have looked the most consistent team over the course of the games that I've seen, and I just think they could shade it by a couple of points, but it doesn't mean that, and for both camps as well, I'd be very fond of a lot of those lads in Crokes, like the lads who have really gone to war for me at different levels as well with both the teams. And it's hard to call one, but I just think Crokes might have a little bit. But I'd happily be wrong come Sunday.
And just a quick one. I mean, the weather forecast, obviously the weather's been pretty poor over the last 2 days. I'm just looking at it here. It actually doesn't look too bad for Sunday, but there's been talk a bit of rain on Sunday as well. Does that help either team, the weather conditions? Will either team be more hoping for rain, or will both teams be looking for the rain to stay away in terms of helping their game plan?
gee, the weather yesterday, I suppose, all around the country was horrendous. A lot of talk in a lot of classrooms yesterday about God moving furniture upstairs or taking photographs, trying to keep kids quiet. But I don't know. I'd love to see both these teams on a dry sod, because I think both of them have that youthful kind of exuberance to really go at the game, to have a quick, really kind of a game that would light up Dublin hurling, to be honest. But look, the conditions being poor, I don't think so. I think it'll come down to that, what you talked about earlier on about leadership. Who can really go to that well, and who can go to the dark place. And it could come down to that mistake in the rain, or and that's the hard thing. Like in 20, we lost a county final when I was in Bowden to Coola, and there was a couple, we were 3 or 4 points up at half time, and then I remember Sean came on, got a great goal. And so like it can happen in the blink of an eye. Like these games are so pivotal and important to clubs, Derek, and it's just over so quick, and you just hope for a spectacle that, like, I suppose the criticism that's there at times about Dublin hurling, you'd hope that can like nationally show on a national stage on Sunday about how good the club game has got, and that's because of, I suppose, the capacity of how it's changed as well from a club point of view, how they've gone and they've really looked at the structure, and that's testament to the work that's going on behind the scenes too.
Yeah, and a quick word for our groundsman. Noel Brady is out on the pitch at the moment, working hard to try and make sure that the pitch is in good condition for this weekend.
I think what people forget sometimes, Derek, as well, is that the girls that opened the gate on Sunday afternoon, worked at Noel, those Charlie, what he used to be in the people that work in a capacity in Parnell Park at every level, from the ground up, it's testament to them. And I suppose there's going to be questions asked of that sort, I suppose, over, especially if there's going to be 3 games on it. But with the earlier game, with the Senior 2 game as well, but the work that goes on there it's colossal in every capacity. So like, it's credit to those people involved. Like you said, they're out there now when there's nobody in Parnell Park, making sure that it's going to be ready for the weekend.
Absolutely, yeah. So the Senior 1 final this Sunday afternoon at Parnell Park. It's 2:30 throw in. It's Kilmacud Crokes versus Na Fianna. Tickets are available on dublingaa.ie, and if you can't make it to Parnell Park on Sunday, the game will also be shown live on TG Cahir, so you can tune in to watch it there. A quick look before we go, Joe, to the Senior 2 final as well. You mentioned it there already. It's Whitehall Colmkill versus Fogs at 12:15 on Sunday afternoon. How do you see that one going? I know you were here for both semi-finals, so how do you see that one going on Sunday?
Yeah, it's an early start, isn't it, for a county final as well? Look, I watched both games. I watched both semi-finals. I think the prize for both these teams, both these clubs, was to get back to Senior A again, and they both achieved that. For Whitehall, like a massively proud hurling club as well, and football club, to get back up to Senior A is huge. And the same goes for Fogs. Like, you look at that, I suppose, that list of honours in Dublin hurling, and Fogs are up at the top. And as a club, as a group of people as well, they'll be delighted to be back in Senior A again. Now, it won't be easy for both teams going back up into Senior A. Because the standard it's a huge gulf in standard, but credit to both teams and credit to both managements. Johnny Greville is actually involved with Fogs. He's coming on board next year as well in a capacity with Westmeath with me too. I was impressed. I saw Fogs. Saw Conor O'Shea at 6 was very, very strong. I was really impressed actually with the young wing back in McFay, who marked Kieran Kilkenny the last, like, tigerish, tough, real in your face defender. Somebody you'd hope that would be looked at as well. Kieran Brennan, Liam Moston, Fergal Healy were very good the last day, I thought, for Fogs. But Whitehall, I suppose, for me, they were probably lucky in ways to get over the Ballantyre game. It was such an amazing game at the end. I think it was 8 or 9 minutes extra time, and it was point for point. And Whitehall have serious pedigree there in their ranks. O'Donnell obviously is the huge one. Darragh Gray as well, and then you look and you've Cormac Costello at one end of the field as well, and it's Paddy Spellisy was outstanding on his frees the last day. Lee Gannon, like, they've got some seriously good players as well. So I think it's going to be a tight one. I think the prize they've already won, if that makes sense, by getting back to Senior A. But when there's a cup on the line, I'm sure both managements will be absolutely strong in the fact that bringing that cup back to the club would be massive for both teams as well. So I think it's a tight encounter. I suppose from a Fogs perspective, you'd love to see them, with the youth that they have coming through, push on as well. I just think Whitehall, might have a little bit much, but I'd hope for a good game for the first one as well.
Good stuff. Okay, so Whitehall Colmkill versus Fogs is at 12:15 on Sunday afternoon. That's the Senior 2 final. Tickets available on dublingaa.ie. And the Senior 1 final is 2:30. It's Kilmacud Crokes versus Na Fianna. Again, tickets available on dublingaa.ie. And if you can't make that game, It's also live on TG Car. Joe, thank you very much for joining us to look ahead to the games this weekend. Hope you enjoyed them this weekend as well.
You're welcome, buddy.